Okay, I'm back. So having to do with this, approach it from this perspective. Think about it. Having everything you could want. I think a couple videos ago I said I was talking about a guy who came in with a Scarface jacket. Scarface is a remake of Macbeth, and Macbeth has to do with that. Think of Babylon as having everything you could want. Literally anything, everything you could want. Think about verse 13 there in chapter 18. And cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. It gets really dark there at the end. What would you want with souls of men? Well, that's where it's like if you watch the Conan movies. That's the kind of thing. There's a bunch of weirdos with that. It's weird, satanic, ritualistic, witchcraft type stuff. Sorceries. Didn't we mention sorceries? By thy sorceries were all nations deceived. I guess when you can't appreciate the sanctity of life itself, then you start to trivialize life and think that you're worthy to manipulate life itself. Isn't that crazy? See, we're reading the Bible right now. We're talking about the Bible. We're talking about what does God want us to do. So we don't have that mentality of thinking like, I'm worthy to manipulate life itself. That's Emperor Palpatine's strategy. Do you realize that? That was his thinking, that he could manipulate the Force metachlorians or whatever to create life. He thought he could create life. See, when you don't appreciate life and you're one of those murdering psychopaths like the Emperor, then you justify things like what it's describing here. And that's when you get really evil and sick. So if you had everything that you could want, and you delved into all those things. See, if you had everything you could want, then there would be no challenge in life anyway. And you'd get bored to the point where you would start to justify those things, It's really sick. Sick when you think about it. How does it get like that? Well, if you have a good generation that appreciates life and likes the sanctity of life and grows maybe a city or a community and is a farming, I don't know. You'd think that person that worked hard to build something like that and lives a long life, they appreciate that, but then the next generation comes along that didn't have to work or anything. And then they didn't have to do anything, so then they don't appreciate what the previous generation saw as something good and holy. And they don't have to struggle and all, so then they get bored. It breaks down a little bit. Then the next generation comes along that has no concept at all because they didn't even see their parents working at all because they had it easy. And the next generation comes along. It starts aborting their kids, I was watching Steven Crowder this morning with those Change My Mind videos. Change my mind on, he says, abortion is murder. Change my mind, and he argues with a bunch of psychotic liberals. That's what I think we're talking about. Life is holy, and it's created by God, and God decides, It's sacred. Satanists and Lucifer, they don't see that. There is no God, so they can take a life and suck the life out of a life and put it in another person that's a soulless monster anyway. It's just, it's sick. But that's what you become. That's this Babylonian mentality. When you have it all, you can't hold on to it. That's what that Scarface movie is all about. That's that song. It's a good workout song. Push it to the limit. Da, 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 da. I know it's 80s music. Maybe you don't like it. I like it. I grew up in the 80s. Or I was born in the 80s. Late 80s. But I still heard a lot of that music. I heard lots of music. But anyway, that's what that song is about, is pushing it to the limit. But you can't hold on to it, Eventually you're going to fall apart. That's what the movie is all about. That's the midpoint of the movie where he ends up getting everything, he starts taking over the business in Florida or wherever that is, and he's bringing in all the money. He gets Michelle Pfeiffer. He gets his tiger. What does he do? He loses all of it. He falls apart. He does have some soul inside of him. He refuses to kill a family, an innocent family. But that's how he loses everything, Maybe that's what will happen here at the end of time. Somebody will actually have a conscience amidst all this evil, and they won't be able to go through with what Satan wants, so then Satan will lose in his little challenge with God, thinking that he can take over and do a better job. He can't. He can't create anything. Everything he creates is a mess. It's evil. He just ruins everything. All right. So chapter 18 is about the final destruction of Babylon. Verse 2, and he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and he and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So, the end of time has to occur when there's nobody left that's going to accept Christ. That's all that's going to be left are a bunch of weirdos. Like Chris always jokes with me, or maybe he's being 100% serious. He'll say to me, Alex, when you leave this place is going to become a wasteland, at my work. That's how much he appreciates me. He thinks I'm like the center of the store. I'm not bold enough to say anything like that, but he'll say that all the time. But anyway, once every saved Christian is out of the picture, they get raptured out, and then every person that could be saved, maybe they are saved as long as they don't take the mark of the beast amidst this, and they get their heads chopped off, and that's what's going to happen in the tribulation. So they all get their heads chopped off. All the Christians have been raptured, and anybody else that is going to endure until the end gets beheaded. What's left? There's all these weirdos. Demon-possessed devils, every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Fascinating why they use bird. So anyway, when that happens, how does this place get annihilated? And it says it happens in 1 hour. I wonder, it also says, shall be utterly burned with fire. And we're not in the Battle of Armageddon. You realize that? Well, I think Ruckman says it's all UN troops, so American troops could be in there too. But they wouldn't be in the United States when it happens. I'm just wondering if this entity is the United States just getting nuked. That's what this makes me think of. But could be wrong. I don't know. But with me, I'm sad seeing somebody think like that, that a sacred human being, a human soul, like a baby, it's holy as far as I'm concerned, a child, perfect, holy, wonderful. Um, and somebody could think to hurt that child or to use that child for the stem cells or something, or an innocent baby that hasn't hurt anybody, completely defenseless, and you go in there and you kill that baby, Um, I don't, I don't like that mindset, and I don't want to really have anything to do with you when, you know, when they think like that. I don't really want to have anything to do with you. I applaud Steven Crowder for reaching across and trying to reach these people, but it's horrible that that mindset exists. And that's the kind of people that you're going to have, I think, here. To think like that makes you easy to be occupied by a devil, you know? And that's what we've become in a lot of ways. How could you ever have that mindset that it's okay to kill a baby? But they don't see it as a baby. That's how they justify their murder. So they see it as a bundle of cells in a scientific perspective. See why I have no friends? How much she hath... Okay, we're at... All nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And you add that, have that added to 12 and 13 with all the trading. United States gets nuked. How is that going to affect the economy, the trade? What sort of stuff is happening? Slaves. They say slave trade is the worst it's ever been. Human trafficking and slavery. How can that be? In a civilized, modern, sophisticated, technological Babylonian masterpiece like what we have, how is that possible for us to be so uncivilized? Must be something satanic or Luciferian going on to justify those kinds of actions. How can you as a human being think that you're better than other human beings and that you can enslave another human being? How is that? Just incredible. All nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The same sins that she's committing, they're all participating in it. They're participating in what she's doing. This thing. Is it a nation? I think it must be a place and a culture, an ideology. And everybody's participating in it with her. Continue with 7. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. She's in denial about herself. Isn't that amazing? That's what I think. She thinks she's a queen and am no widow and shall see no sorrow. Because she's just drunk on living deliciously. And you know what I think? I think of that lady that yells treason, treason. Treason! Treason! That's back in Chronicles. Chronicles and Kings. What was her name? Azalea or something? No, I can't think of it. But she was an evil queen that took over for her son. Her son was just a baby. Athaliah. There it is. Athaliah. And she takes over and she just causes so much harm. Or Ahab and Jezebel. Jezebel. That spirit of Jezebel. It's just evil. How do you justify this type of stuff? How do you justify enslaving other human beings and then take it a step further? And how do you control the souls of men? How does anybody do that? Well, actually, it's not so much in the slavery aspect, it's in the getting everybody involved in the fornication and the trade and the business practice. You control people, and then you control their desires and what they see as pleasurable or desirable in this life or in this existence, or what is culturally appropriate and stuff. Media manipulation, brain manipulation. What do I find attractive? You know? How do you find any of this attractive? But people that don't appreciate life, you know, they have no soul. What they find attractive is some obscure, what do you call it? Interpretive art, modern art. It's like somebody dips a paintbrush in a black paint and they go, man, that's $1 million painting right there, you know? And it's just this horrible black blob. And they're like, that is cultured. When you're a soulless monster that trades in human beings and allows young women to be raped hundreds of times and ruins them utterly, years and years of human trafficking and prostitution, child trafficking, you execute children and steal their organs and sell them on your black market and stuff. When you're that kind of being, you've lost your soul. You've lost it all. You're an occupant of a demon, a devil. You are the seed of Satan. And in so many colleges, just going back to that Louder with Crowder this morning, watching those Change My Mind videos, you know, it's so sad. He's talking to these college students, and they all have that mentality. I mean, he's getting through to some of them, praise God. It's really amazing that he does that. But it's so sad just watching. I notice the little nuances and behavior and stuff, human interaction, and it's just so sad to see people so young and to be so evil. Hopefully God will get through to them in Jesus' name, but how can there be that many that have no appreciation of life? That's what I think about with this. It's a culture that says that. I have no appreciation of life. I don't care about human beings, but yet you are a human being. You see all this going on, and nobody cares that all this is happening. So heaven rejoices over the destruction of this place. And if you're a Christian today, you should too. You know? This shouldn't exist. This type of mentality, this kind of sin, shouldn't be in this world. It can't be occupied with God. This is evil, and it's very prevalent in this country. It can't be here for much longer. I just feel the sorrow of everyone. You feel it, the weight coming down, you know? Just feel the evil. How can this be? But God is so patient, and He's waiting for those last few, and then He's going to take care of this. I know you probably want vengeance right now. You know, you want to go in there like commando and just wipe out the whole place, you know? Trust me, God is going to be a lot more efficient in how He takes care of all this, but we're here to say something against it and to make our stand against it. And so be it. If a bunch of liberals behead me in the tribulation, you know, hopefully we're not going to be here in the tribulation. We're going to get raptured out of here. But if we are, you know, that's the kind of mentality, you see that in those Change My Mind videos. That generation is growing, and the fruits of that generation are going to come forth, and that final generation is going to be the most evil, occupied group of people you can imagine. Scary stuff. By thy sorceries were all nations deceived. That's fascinating in 23, just to close with that. Well, this place ends, heaven rejoices that it's gone, be heard no more at all in thee, and the light, 23, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for thy merchants were thy great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. So that's interesting that all the nations were deceived by this. Like, how did it get to this point to think that you could trade in the souls of men and human beings, you know? It's a power trip to think you can control another human being. It's sick. This is a sickness. I also think 7 has to do with feminism. I could go and rant some more about that, but I'm not going to. But think about that. Power over other human beings. That's how they justify this. It's horrible. Just horrible. It's so... Life itself is holy and sacred. And when one human being thinks they can control another human being, you know, you shouldn't take a step down that road, because that's where this leads. This is the greatest evil you can imagine. Thank God it's going to be over. Inevitably, He's going to end that. But scary stuff. This is very scary stuff. Let's stop here. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day.